and they calmed down. Then McCoy did the same thing. He did about 10 minutes, and he had him shout, he had him screaming by the end of his solo too. And I was like, oh, okay, that's the way it is now. It was a marvelous man. But I had heard Train with Miles, so I wasn't completely unfamiliar with it, and I had all his records. But I heard him live with Miles and Cannonball, Wynton and Paul and Jimmy. It was right after Kind of Blue came out.
Yeah.
1959.
Well, I noticed that black clubs in those days too, even Wally's in Boston, when you really started to play something, you'd have some people that would holler out. There was always a little bit. Yeah, tell me about it. Tell me.
Talk about your mama.
Yeah,
Phil used to yell that out.
I still love to yell.
Tell me about your mama.
Tell me about your mama.
So anyway, the LA scene, what you're touching on is that was very lucky guy. Even though my dad had died, he moved back into a great scene. I started making connections. Well, because of Jill and Terry, Bobby, Herbie, Dexter, Teddy, the list goes on and on and on. And I was out taking it all in. I was single. I had a job. I had money. I was single. I had friends. And we would do stuff. And mostly involved either trying to play, rehearse, learn music, or go to see other people play.
I was wondering.
I saw Scott LaFaro with Ornette.
I was going to say that you heard Scott with Ornette.
With Ornette, yeah.
How were people reacting to that at that time? Like, this
sounded fine. Sounded great. Blackwell was playing drums. Can't go wrong with that guy.
No.
Ed Blackwell, man, was a great genius, in my opinion. But a rare human being as well. But it sounded good. Nobody came. There were no people in the club at all.
That's what I was wondering about. Were there people?
Who was there were the teenagers who loved Ornette. It was me and Jane Getz and Joanne Burkeen and Bobby Hutcherson and Herbie Lewis, and we weren't old enough to get in the place, but they had a little restaurant thing in the back, and they'd let us sit in there and listen and occasionally look out the door to see the band. And then on the breaks, there was nobody there, so the band would come in and hang with us. With the kids.
Which club was that?
That was called Digger, I think. The Digger.
Digger. And so Ornette would just come, Don Cherry, they come and just sit in back and hang out with you guys?
What were they going to do? Well, they either did that or they went and got high, or I don't know where the fuck they did, but that's how I met Blackwell. I didn't really meet Scott, but, it didn't seem like weird at all that the cat, at least some of the cats, we'd come in and say hi. I mean, Joanne knew Ornette and Don, that played with them. They sort of knew us, and in some cases had played with us. They knew Herbie.
Was Joanne with Charles at that time yet, or?
Yeah, they were married right in high school.
Right, so they were.
I played with them when they were, let's say, like a year or two older than me, and I was still a teenager. We were going to their house, and the bass player, Hersh Hamill, was the bass player with Art Pepper's group. And we went over to Joanne and Charles to play some new music they'd written. And man, it was something else. I was so impressed with them.
Really?
Oh, yeah. But there was a good quality of players in my age group was pretty great, man. I mean, there were all the older players, and then there was younger, like drummers that you never heard of, like Don Joham and Nick Martinez and Mike Romero, and I'm searching now, but there were a bunch.
I still don't know.
Will Bradley Jr.
Wow.
Yeah, really so great players, and most of them friends of mine, or at least well acquainted, because we used to do a lot of hanging out and a lot of club hopping, and then started gigging a lot. So. You just get to know people. And I was determined to know everybody I needed to know and to learn every music that I might need to know. So I was memorizing Horace Silver arrangements and Bud Powell tunes, Charlie Parker tunes, especially Bud and Horace. But I was listening to, the music of the day and was just soaking it up. I have a very uh, let's say a very good musical memory.
Yeah,
I can't remember where I put my glasses.
but you can remember tunes you played 25 years ago, right?
Oh, even further back than that. I can remember what it felt like to be sitting there hearing Coltrane live, with the quartet for the first time.
Yeah,
You
we're
know,
funny that
so
way.
close, man. I was like, woo!
I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I was remembering.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know, I heard somebody. So then you got into okay, you went with Paul Horn for a little while.
Well, the way it progressed was in LA was you got good and then you got connected and you made friends and then your friends introduced you to people. Or you got called for a gig because they couldn't get anybody else. You did a good job, so you moved up a little bit in the spectrum. And that's what I kind of did. I didn't start at the bottom exactly because I was playing with really good people right from my late teen years. Terry
Right.
Gibbs, Bud Shank, Gary Peacock, Dennis Buttermere, Mike Melvoin, Chuck Berghofer, Jim Huart.
So you got very young
He
as
was
well.
really good. He was a really good player. A lot of them. I mean, I knew Barney Kessel, I knew Herb Ellis, and I knew all these musicians, and I did commercial gigs with them sometimes. I did a jazz gig. I did started going out of town because I wanted to travel. I went out and traveled with the Four Preps, which was a gig that I believe Johnny Guerin used to have. I followed Guerin in a lot of groups as he kind of jumped me.
And what
That's
happened?
okay. He was good.
Who was Johnny Guerin?
He was a drummer, very successful from San Diego, California. He ended up
And
being
he played with like
a part. He was ended up being a part New York, L.A. studio musician, very well known, and he ended up being in the band called the L.A. Express, or as we used to call them, Lax Press. It was Laxpress, Lax Press. A very good drummer, very competitive guy too, and he and I were really competitive. But we were friends. We were never enemies. We were friends, but it would be, but I had the attitude of the old timers. You go to a jam session, the guy could be your best friend, man. You're going to go up to play and you're going to cut him up.
yes,
If you didn't, that's the way it went, right?
that was. You were
You do it if you could.
yeah, I got beaten up twice in my career. I usually held my own or got the best of people, but there were two times where I was mugged. I was Ronnie Cuber one
Oh,
night came, and he and Tom Harrell were playing, and I had drank a little too much, and they asked me if I wanted to play the last set, and I only lived around the corner from Sweet Basil, so I went and climbed my stairs and went to get my horn. I should have known when I climbed the stairs, don't go back, but I didn't. Anyway, I went back and they played some Donnelly, and Ronnie cut me a new one. There was
he was pretty mean, man. Very mean,
a
actually.
very good friend of mine. We loved sharing
Yeah,
things together and
sure.
dens of iniquity and all kinds of things.
Sure. Well, that's what I mean, though. Why should he give you, some favoritism? You were
Yeah.
up there. You had your horn. You were up there.
Oh yeah. I didn't demand any or expect anything
Yeah.
less than that.
Yeah.
I
I
was
only played with Ronnie a couple of times, and I never played a jazz gig with him. I think I played just like jingles and stuff. But the baritone player that I did play a lot with, there were two, and one was Nick Brignola, and the other was Joe Temperley. And
uh-huh.
both bad motherfuckers in their own way, especially Nick, as far as bebop goes, man. It'd be hard to keep up with that, but he was just amazing.
Yeah, he was a great player. I didn't know him. I got to play with Pepper Adams a few times.
Oh, I love Pepper. Yeah,
He was
I
another one
played
that
with
took
Pepper.
no prisoners.
Pepper was wonderful. Yeah, he kicked my ass really bad. Joe
Yeah.
Farrell kicked my ass really bad.
Who was that?
Joe Farrell.
Oh, Joe Farrell would do
Yeah,
that too. Yes.
yeah.
Joe.
Freddie Hubbard kicked my ass real bad. Phil tried to kick my ass, but I kicked his ass more than once. But I knew when to bob and weave with Phil. But those other guys, it's like you have to decide, as a drummer, you have to decide how long you can keep up a certain level of intensity. You got to start somewhere and you got to go somewhere.
Right.
I can't just play and bang it out, I got to play music. So all those guys tested that, and at the end of the performance, which I think were successful, I still felt like I needed to get in the hot tub or the ice bath, perhaps.
What goes up must come down.
Well, yeah, but the adrenaline and the cocaine and the alcohol and the scene, the fellowship. There's somebody like Pepper, man. You knew him, right?
Oh yeah.
He's a great cat, man. I love all the guys from Detroit. I always got along great with the Detroit guys. Huh?
Attitude of their own. Like, one time we were playing this gig it was a festival in Saratoga, New York. And it was a kind of all-star band. And the front line was Pepper and Jack Walrath and me. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, and Al Daly was on piano.
Oh.
And the bass player was a fellow named Anthony Cox.
Yeah, I remember him.
Bobby Ward from Boston.
Yeah, yeah.
I brought Bobby because Bobby and I were playing all the time together.
Nice.
And we tried to be, you try to be, Pepper was the oldest guy in the band. So we were deferring to him. And said, Pepper, what would you like to play? And like Jack and I are being very courteous, very nice to Pepper. And he says, play whatever you want. Why do you keep asking me? Like he was like very impatient. Yeah. Like,
so what did you play?
I think we started out with What Is This Thing Called Love?
Yeah.
And then did some other stuff. And, I think we did a ballad medley where everybody could call their own. It went well, but he was like, you were trying to be nice to Pepper, and he was annoyed.
This is one of the cats.
Yeah, he would just get annoyed.
He never seemed to demand a special attention. Did you ever see him with Tommy and Thad or any of the guys from Detroit or Elvin? And the way they were with each other was so funny because they had like inside shit that went back to like high school,
Really?
Barry, also.
Yeah, I never really got to see those guys together except hanging out at Bradley's sometimes.
Well, that was good.
I would see them.
Well, I'm very lucky, Bob. I'm older than you, and I was around longer, and all these guys were around, and I got to know them all. In a lot of cases, play with them. Fate puts you where it wants you, I guess. I'm not really a fatalist, and I'm not religious, but there is something about being in the right place at the right time, and also having the right attitude. I always knew what I want. Once I decided what I was going to do, I didn't leave myself a second choice.
That's very interesting. I found that to be the case in many musicians' stories. There's a certain kind of serendipity that comes from the attitude that you have in the first place about it. Like serendipity doesn't just fall into your life.
Yeah.
You have to be the motivating force, and then things happen for you. And then you have these weird occurrences that will happen because we generate it. The closest thing is like Yogananda, the biography of a yogi.
I do. I know it well.
The way he describes how things happen to him as this vision of who he wants to be.
Right.
And what he's seeking. And through the seeking, the events happen, and I find that's, I'm writing my memoirs now, and a publisher just says, well, what makes your story a little different than just a bunch of remembrances of musicians, mostly long dead, who have biographies of their own? So I had to really sit down and think about that. And what you're talking about is an affirmation of something that I just wrote. Well, I think what makes it a little different, and yet not at all different from anybody else that has managed to make a mark in the music, is that through our will of who we want it to be and what we learned from our mentors, and that created the things that would happen to us. You just threw yourself in situations. And
well, you're familiar with the Talking Heads, the band, the Talking Heads?
But only
well, they have a song called "Once in a Lifetime," and it's really just about things happen, you know. The days go on. I can't remember all the lyrics, but anyway, I had it all fresh in my mind. But you check it out; it's like really a wonderful thing. There's a movie called "Stop Making Sense."
I've heard about that.
There's a live, it's a concert movie of the Talking Heads, and I think it's great. But you know, I have this interest in all kinds of music. I'm basically a bebopper, but you know, I learned that bebop pretty good.
Yeah,
So
you did.
stop making sense.
I'm going to write that down.
It's a
Stop me.
movie. It's a movie and an album, I suppose. But I just recommend the movie because the visuals are tremendous.
And what did you say that song was called?
It's called Once in a Lifetime.
Once in a Lifetime.
He's likening the progress of life to water. Is all I can really remember about it. The days go on, water flowing down, you know, back in the pool again after the money's gone, once in a lifetime. And then it's like, for once in a lifetime, and then he goes, same as it ever was. Same as it ever was. And it's like, damn, man. David Byrne is the guy's name.
Right, I know of that.
Tremendous, man. Tremendous.
So you came east.
Yeah. Where were we?
With a cat named Milt Trenier, who's a name that I
Milton Trenier.
And he was a vocalist, basically.
He was one of the Trenier brothers, a very famous lounge act. They played big clubs as well, like the Copacabana, and they were on the Ed Sullivan Show. And they were two twin brothers, and Milt was the third brother. He was regarded as, they were the entertainers. I mean, they could, you know, jump off the stage and do the splits, and they did incredible stuff. And the music was totally swinging, like blues, you know, boogie woogie blues, R&B, like what R&B was at that time, but it was with the entertainment, with the tuxedos and all that. And Milton was the younger brother, decided to step out on his own. And in the early 60s, he started going out on his own, and he always had a trio with him. I was approached in Los Angeles to work with Milt, and it sounded like about 10 months on the road and not coming back to LA. And at that time, I thought, that sounds like a good idea. I was just about to turn 21 when I got in this Cadillac convertible with a guy I didn't know who was Milt's valet. And we drove from LA to Miami without stopping. And we opened in Miami about the same week that I turned 21. First week of January.
That's when Miami was popping too. There was a lot going on.
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, that's where I met Ira. I told you the story about Ira. And I had met Steve Bagby already in Chicago. And I met his other people in Miami, like the twins. And, and I met Vince Maggio, Vince Lawrence, but I had met him in Chicago also. And Guy Viveros, just many wonderful musicians and people.
Guy Viveros one night, he said he's hanging with Ira, and Guy is saying, Ira, remember in 1953 when we were in Chicago and we played at the Beehive and we played behind Lester Young, and then the next week Bird came in, and then this and then that happened, and Ira turns to Guy and he says, Guy, you're living in the past. You've got to stop living in the past. But Ira, I like the past. It's so much cheaper there.
That's great, man. Who was that guy?
That was the Guy Viveros.
Oh, it was Guy? Oh, okay. Yeah. Much cheaper there. He was nutty, man. You ever hear him play?
Oh, I played a lot with him.
Oh my God. You could really play, man. Couldn't believe the stuff he could do. And of course I had become, through listening to Ira's records, I had become very fond of, and I didn't know him yet, but Wilbur Campbell and that whole kind of Ike Day way of playing. And Guy was very familiar with that.
Right. He was Ike Day's protege. I mean,
I know. I became fascinated with Ike Day. And then I got to know Wilbur quite well, and he'd tell me stories if I would give him drugs.
Who
And he
said-
was running a drug treatment program at the time, so
who
I guess he
said?
knew what he was doing. Wilbur Campbell,
Wilbur Campbell. That's funny.
yeah. The
Yeah, we
great,
played,
great
played a
drummer.
little bit with him. I got a couple of nights with him.
Yeah. Well, you
But
play with everybody, man. You're like me.
well, I sought everybody out, and then sometimes I didn't, and they just showed up in my life.
Likewise.
I think I
Likewise. Well,
wanted to, but Guy
I got
Viveros,
called for, oh, go ahead.
he could play those Cherokee tempos and
Oh,
make
yeah.
you feel so relaxed on them that it was just like playing a ballad or something.
Sure.
He
That's
felt
exactly right.
you felt the multi meters going.
Yeah.
You feel the ding, the ding, the ding, the ding, but you felt it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like Indian music.
Yeah, the levels of
Or
the
slow, and then you build on the level. Galper and I were talking about this the other day.
What was how was that?
Well, he called me for some reason, I don't know, and then we ended up just talking all kinds of crazy stuff. I've known Hal for 60 years,
Uh, I've known him
We
for
had a
50.
thing. We had musically, we had always had a thing for each other. And we were Stan Getz together, and Dave Holland was the bass player. And Stan fired us, but I later got the feeling that Dave had something to do with it, because he wanted to get Richie Byrack and Jack DeJohnette on the gig. And Hal and I were fine with it, really. We liked playing with Stan, but it wasn't the most fun and exciting thing. And the money was pretty good, but it wasn't great. But in any case, later on, I'm playing with Phil. I'm walking back to my car from the Village Vanguard, and I walk right by this van. And in the van were Sam Rivers and Dave Holland and Barry Altschul. So I stopped to say hi. And Dave comes over and says, "Hey, Bill, I bet you're happy." Galper had just joined Phil. I said, "I bet you're happy you got Hal back." we had this thing. It was kind of, well, you could say that it could be mutually exclusive at times.
Well, that was like my favorite, in a way, my favorite version of Phil's band
It was a good version.
that I heard, the one with Hal.
Like the quartet or the quintet?
Well, the quintet with Harry Leahy, was that the
Well, that was before Hal. That was Mike.
Harold? Sorry, no, the
Yeah,
Harry
Tom
Leahy.
was the after 5 years, Tom was the fifth. But we did quartet for about 4.5 years.
Yeah, I didn't really hear the band with Tom, but I mean, whoops. Sorry, somebody's coming over.
The Avon calling?
Avon, that's Avon. That I heard the band, the quartet with. Actually, I heard you guys in Montreal with Phil at the
The
festival.
Doo-Doos? The
Uh,
Rising Sun?
No, I didn't hear you there, but I heard you at the festival right before Zoot died.
Mm-hmm.
We were listening backstage, and there was a big band. Vic Vogel had this big band,
Uh-huh.
and and Hal, of course, is listening to the band, and he's going, "The drummers are fascist."
Yeah, those are pretty interesting ideas.
And but I mean, yeah, Hal, is a brilliant guy. I love talking to Hal.
Uniquely brilliant.
Yeah, he really is. And when he just a quick story, when he separated from Pamela, when they broke up, we were working together with Chet. He was replacing Danko for a minute, and he didn't want to go home. The marriage was ending and this and that. So he stayed at my crib in the Village. I had this one room little pad, and I gave him my bed, and I took a mattress on the floor. I took made a little sleeping bag on the floor, but we didn't sleep much. And he showed me for about a day and a half. He stayed 2 days with me, and we must have played 7-8 hours.
Nice.
And he showed me everything I've ever learned about pentatonics. I asked him about pentatonics. I said, "Hal, I don't know much about them. What do you do with them? How do you do this?" He said,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, bang." And he just gave me a really a 10-hour lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And
He's
it
a
was
great teacher,
Yeah,
There's great principles that he uses in his teaching. I've adopted some of them.
yeah, I have too. He's really smart cat.
Indeed.
But he did play with Stan Getz for a minute. And
Yeah, well, we were with Stan together. It was about 6 weeks.
And then I remember you said this when you went with Milt Trenier. That's when you met Albert Daly.
Yeah, well, it was in Chicago, and I was there with Milton, and I met Albert. Somebody introduced us. It might have been Milt. Said, this is Albert Daly's a piano player with Demita Joe, and I didn't know. I knew who Demita was. I hadn't heard her yet, and then a little later in the year, I got to hear them live with Albert conducting and playing, while completely out of his gourd, I might add. Did a great job. And we just hit it off. I was 21, and he was a bit older. And we decided to get together and play. There's a bunch of us got together and played at the club I was working at. It was, I think, Marshall Thompson, the drummer, was there. Willie Pickens might have been there. He was in that relief trio. And the bass player, Conti Milano.
Oh, I knew Conti well.
Oh,
In
yeah. Well, he
Miami.
moved to Miami, yeah. Conti was a
Yeah.
great friend of mine and a great benefactor of mine as well. He's one of the guys that bass players always liked me for some reason.
A benefactor in what
Well,
sense?
he just kind of adopted me. He said, Bill, where are you staying? I'm staying at the Maryland Hotel. I said, don't stay there. Stay with me next door. He had an apartment in the building next door. And
Oh,
he
that's
said,
one of
well,
my
so where are you
things.
going to go? He said, well, I got a girlfriend, man, across the street. I'm going to go to her place. So I go to Chicago, and I'd be put up in his place until he moved to Miami. Never charged me a dime.
Yeah, Conti was funny, man. He would sing "It's Always You."
Oh, I remember that tune. Yeah,
That was his favorite song.
nice tune.
And he said Bird would ask him to come up and sing that song with him. He said every time Bird saw him in the club, he'd say,
Yeah,
come on up and sing
yeah.
"It's Always You."
I think Bird, like Sonny Rollins, is a really big fan of songs,
Yeah, and
The
lyrics.
idea that you remember Sonny did the record and you had Earl Coleman on it.
Singing "My Ideal" and "Two Different
Did
Worlds."
you ever find the love? There was a Billy Eckstein kind of sound,
Our vocalist, yeah.
Remember the guy who was, not to stray too much, but the guy who was with Dizzy's big band, Austin Cromer?
I didn't know him.
They called him the Beast. He had one of those voices like that. And he was on the Mideast tours with
But Arthur Prysock was another one that had that kind of
oh
voice.
yeah, oh yeah. Arthur Price. Yeah, man. His brother could play too, man. Red.
Well, oh, yes. Tenor player, great tenor
Yeah,
player.
yeah. In any case, there's a funny story about Austin Cromer is if he had too much to drink, he kind of went nuts. So Phil has a story. They're in the Middle East somewhere, and it's Quincy. It's the band Quincy put together for Dizzy. So it's a mixed band, racially mixed band. And Austin would have too much to drink, and then he'd say wanted to kill some white people. And he was in the next room, and Phil and Frank Rehack were literally holding the doorknob to keep him from getting in. And he's like a big guy, well-built guy, trying to get in. He's going to kill the white guys, and they're holding the door, and he's door is shaking, and Marty Flax, the baritone player, he comes in. He was like, "What's happening?" I said, "Austin's on a warpath, man. He wants to kill some white people." He says, "I'll talk to him. I know jujitsu." so So they opened the door. Marty pushed Marty in there. And in about 5 minutes, he's like pounding, let me out, let me out. They let him out, and they're holding the door again. He said, what happened? I said, Austin, man, he bit me on the ear and stole my watch.
Marty Flax did that to Austin.
I know jujitsu.
Wait, Austin bit Marty.
Yeah. Marty said he could take care of him because he knew jujitsu. And he went in and Austin bit him on the ear and stole his watch.
That's hilarious.
And he can sing, man. This is like a flamingo.
Oh, did you hear about the flamingo that was on somebody's lawn?
Yeah, it was singing Al Hibbler.
Right, exactly. Herb Jeffries.
That's right, Herb Jeffries. I never played with him, but I did play a couple tunes with Al Hibbler one time. I played with a lot of singers in LA. Many, some very good. The best probably were Anita O'Day and Joe Williams.
Yeah,
But
I
there
got
were
to
others
see.
that weren't bad. Ruth Price was very good. June Christy was great. They were all different. I always loved accompanying singers.
Oh yes, I mean, there's a certain way. Wait, just give me 1 second here. Excuse me. Yeah.
Were they talking about anything interesting?
Yes, they
More
were.
more interesting than me? I find that hard to believe.
That's right. That's like. Yeah, Lou Bennett one night. Did you know
The
Lou,
organ player.
organ player?
Yeah.
And Lou moved to Europe early and really largely because of the racist element of America. He didn't care for white people in particular, other than certain people
Yeah,
like,
I don't either.
yeah, me either. That's right. So I understand. Yeah, I'm exactly like that as well. But we were at this place, Cafe Central in Madrid,
Yeah, in Madrid, sure.
and I was finishing my gig, and I was about to leave. It was a Monday right after I'd been playing, and Lou had been playing down the street at Clamores, which was another cafe in Madrid. And we decided we would meet for lunch on Monday before we both left town and, catch up and have a nice time,
Sure.
with friends. So when we're there, they have these trees and they start putting in these trunks of trees and they put the tables in the front together and they bringing in these tree trunks. And I'm thinking, what's this? Because a new band is coming in on Monday night. And there's a little placard in front of you which it has something to read. It seems that these people from northeastern Spain are coming in as a percussion troupe, and they play language by beating these logs,
Oh, okay.
and that's their the thing that they do. And it
Okay.
says originally they were created as messengers, as vehicles
They were.
just from village to village in Spain. So I'm reading this in Spanish and making a little translation, and Lou reads a little bit. And I said, Lou, you know what it says here? It says that they may go back as far as Africa, competing on logs from village to village to give messages. And Lou says, so now you want to take this away from me too?
That's funny. Well, there's a strong, as they say, Moorish strain in Spain. A lot of mixing up in Spain.
Yeah, down Alhambra way.
Yeah, especially with of course, the Alhambra. That's something else. That whole region, man, with all that architecture. I always liked Spain. I like Spain. I like Portugal. I felt lucky enough to have traveled to all of those places more than once.
When I found Spain, I found finally someplace that keeps my hours.
Right. You see you at dinner around midnight.
Right. Your concert
Yeah.
starts. So I was going to get to then so you're with Milton here.
Yeah,
And
we went out with Milt. We played supper clubs. We played in, let's see, Chicago. We played in Miami. We played in Milwaukee. We played in Omaha, Nebraska. We played in New Bedford, Massachusetts. And he brought me to New York. He took a vacation for a couple of weeks or a week, and he brought me to New York, my first trip to New York. So this is summer of '63. He drops me off at the President Hotel on West 48th Street. Says, this is a good musician's hotel. They have a good rate. Those days we paid for our own rooms. He paid me enough money. So, money is worth a lot more then. So in any case, I go in and I'm checking in, and I think the rate was like $30 a week, at the President. So I'm signing in and everything. And this bus pulls up on the street. I look around and it's a Count Basie bus, and all these guys from the band get off, and now they're standing in line behind me. I'm checking into New York, my first 10 minutes in New York. And there's the entire Basie band behind me.
wow,
I'm like, damn. I was like, holy, okay, this is going to be fun.
it's
And
really
then
cool that
I
they
went
say
and
about
changed
you.
clothes and went down to Birdland and saw Pee Wee Marquette. I was thrilled. And then I saw Mel Lewis because he was playing with Jerry Mulligan in the concert jazz band. And we knew each other from LA. So immediately it was like, I was in. Mel says, meet me at Jim and Andy's tomorrow morning. So walking to Jim and Andy's and that. Well, there's other parts of the story, but that was the important one was that I saw Mel and he took me. We went to Jim and Andy's. I walk in, it's 10 in the morning. There's Brookmeyer and Zoot and Jim Hall all sitting at the bar having a taste, 10 in the morning. So Mel and I go to the booth and we're having something to eat. Then he takes me upstairs and introduces me to Phil Ramone. And that was the beginning of my time in New York. And I met Dick Burke. I think I told you that story. That Dick Burke wanted to meet me, and he'd given his number to Albert Stinson, the bass player. Albert gave it to me when he came back from New York the first time. And so I called this number up. It's like 2 years later or something. And Dick Burke there.
Well,
Said, yeah, yeah, this is Dick. I said, who's this? It says Bill Goodwin. I just got to town. He says, I'll be right over, man. And he literally was there in about 45 minutes. And he jumped in the car. We went off driving around Manhattan and Brooklyn. And, this was like my second day in New York. So it was fabulous. And ever since then, of course, then I said, boy, I really would love to move. And the level of playing that I was hearing was so high. I say, we had good players in LA. It was very diffused, it's all spread out. I was working all the time. And, by 5 years after working with Milt and get back to LA, I really just didn't take over, man, but I really had a lot of gigs. I played with a lot of people and good people and made pretty decent money.
But you went back to LA.
I went back after the trip, yeah. I got off the group after about 10 months. Went back to Los Angeles, and he wanted me to stay, but I had done, I'd done what I wanted to do, and there's a lot of possibilities in LA.
So you went back to LA again in?
Well, it's the end of '63.
63, 64.
I never gave up my place. I had a place in Hollywood the whole time and paid rent on.
Right. So you had that until you moved to Pennsylvania.
Oh no, we moved to New York.
You did move.
Yeah, we left LA behind. We moved to New York in '69, and after a year hanging around New York and Brooklyn, decided to do something different. Had visited Bob Dorough in the Poconos.
I knew Bob.
Sure. I knew Bob from playing with him in Los Angeles. We had played folk music and other things, and we became very good friends. And so I looked him up. He brought us out to visit his place in Pennsylvania. And kind of, I had a wife and a child. She was about 10. And the child, I mean.
I wasn't.
So it turns out Dorough had a daughter the same exact age. And in fact, those girls grew up together and went through all of their school, grade school, junior high, high school together. Airily became fabulous flute player. Anyway, we just fell in love with the area. Bob helped us find our first rental house. And it was a 10-room farmhouse on 130 acres.
Wow.
For $100 a month.
No.
Oh, yeah. 1970. We moved in January of 70. I mean, I could afford not to work, and I was working. So we became like, like faux hippies, in a garden, letting our hair grow out. My wife let her hair grow on her legs, and the whole early '70s thing. It was great. We turns out there's some musicians there, and we all became friends, and it led to some gigs. And I was already working with Bob. He started employing me on his things as soon as I got to New York.
Well, you also had the Schoolhouse Rock.
Well, yeah, when I started that, but it didn't start till '73. Before then, he was doing advertising, and he actually hired Gary Burton's entire band a couple of times. Plus there might be another player he might be playing too.
So Bob was like writing jingles and stuff. Is that?
Oh yeah, it was very, very successful. He and Ben Tucker, they wrote and worked together. Ben was more of the business guy. He wrote also. Bob's the word guy.
Uh-huh.
Between the two of them, Bob mostly did the music and Ben did the selling, but he did very well. And I worked for them a number of times.
See, I didn't,
Those are the details you couldn't possibly know, man, unless, you were on that scene. And I also had this relationship with Chuck Israels, the bass player, almost like a family friend type relationship.
right.
And
Chuck
he
had
was
that
in fact
trouble.
close to my sister and my brother-in-law. And he sort of, became tight. He had heard me play when I had first come to New York, and it was encouraging. Chuck very particular.
Oh, very.
But by the time I got to New York and was, a more seasoned player, then he really thought we played well together, which we still do.
I had a date one time. A kind of folk singer had this kind of date, and he very one of the few gigs I ever got like that. But there was a friend of mine named Jim Chaparro, who was a drummer in Connecticut, and Jim was kind of a hippie, but he knew this folk singer. So he figured it needed a horn on one tune and it needed a bass player. So we called Chuck Israels and me. And that's actually how I first met Chuck. I mean, I'd seen him around, but I didn't really know him.
Sure.
I thought he had the funniest line of the whole session. The music had left a lot to be desired.
Uh,
A certain thing in the way the chord changes were going that the guy had written the changes, and Chuck knew that he did not mean these changes. He meant something else, and Chuck corrected it. And while he was sitting there correcting the guy's changes, he's saying over and over, ungrammatical, just
ungrammatical.
His harmony is ungrammatical.
Yeah.
That was,
he's he's a super musical talent, but he is such a revisionist. He had to write an arrangement, and then every time you played it over a period of time, it would change somewhat. And finally, I accused him, in a joking way, because we're very good friends. I said, he's talking about writing, doing this and that. He can write very well and can do on assignment and has done. But as far as his own music, he keeps just rethinking it all the time. So I was kidding him about it, saying, so how many arrangements you've actually written, Chuck? Aren't there about 5 or 6 now? And he would laugh, of course, because, but he's something, man, and very particular. And I was with the envy of some drummers and not so much other drummers. And of course, critic-wise, none of those guys ever liked me that much. Too subtle, I guess.
oh, the jazz critics, you mean?
Yeah. I've never caught on with them. The few become good friends with, Ira Gittler and Dan Morgenstern. I consider them friends.
Yeah, there were a few, and well, yeah, most of them, they don't really know.
Yeah, exactly.
They've not really tried it themselves, and
They try to act like they know. So Whitney Valiant was a very good writer, and he could write about music in such a way that if you knew the player, you could really see what he was talking about. But he was like a failed drummer. So many of them were failed drummers. Gary Giddens too.
Gary Gibbs was a failed alto player.
He's what?
He had an alto. He was a failed alto player as well.
Oh, was it alto? Okay, I thought it was drums. No, that's somebody else.
No.
In any case, yeah, they kind of pick on me in a way. Like
Well,
somehow I wasn't worthy. I said, well, how come I'm working all the time? I mean, I didn't really take it up with them. I don't really give a shit. But I would notice that you take into account, I tell my students, say, who's working? Who's making a living playing? That's what you want to do, right? And so you should be thinking about that, not just, your Tony Williams licks. Nothing wrong with that, but, you have to know people, you have to know how to play a lot of different ways.
there's a practical side to it.
Yeah. Well, I got in a situation with Phil where I didn't have to think about commercial music much. And so I lost some of my touch with that. I can still sort of play it. I know what it is.
Tony Bennett.
I did with Tony in the 60s. Paul Horn. It was Paul. He hired Paul Horn's whole group except the piano player because he had Tommy Flanagan on piano. And so I got to know Tommy.
Really? That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
we played Vegas, we played Tahoe, we played LA, played quite a few gigs.
What was Tony like to work with?
Great, fabulous, no sweat. He just loved to sing, and they loved, the musicians, and they all loved him, and smoking tons of reefer, and he'd bring like a liquor cart into the, excuse me, where was I? You and me, buddy. Where were we? I don't know. Thanks,
Tony
Laura.
Bennett.
Oh, Tony, he was wonderful to work with, and he and I, he was very easy to get along with, and he loved hanging with the musicians, and he was a big pothead. But I
Yeah,
had this great experience of being taken to New York with Paul and the group to play on his first TV special, which was a live TV special in 1966, I think. And spent the whole week in New York rehearsing, and then did the show live. Did it twice, once for a dress rehearsal, once live on TV. And on the show, he was a guest for all jazz musicians. He had the Paul Horn Quintet. He had Tommy Flanagan playing with the, conducting for him and playing the piano. He had Milt Jackson, had Bob
really.
Hackett, had Candido, and Buddy Rich. So the band was Ralph Burns conducting the band, 30-piece orchestra with all the greatest record day guys of that time, the Bernie Glow and Ernie Royal and Irby Green was in the band, and Richard Davis on bass, and Saul Goodwin on drums, and just fabulous band. So I had brought an ounce of marijuana from LA with me. And I met Saul Goodwin and said something about, boy, I wish we could get high. I said, well, I brought some shit with me from California. He says, come on. He goes, let's get Buddy. He goes, and he grabs Buddy Rich, who I'd already met. So I sort of knew Buddy. And we go down in the sub basement of NBC, and I'm just rolling joints and turning these guys on, and they never stopped talking. It was hilarious. I couldn't get a word in edgewise. And we had a whole week of that. So Buddy and I got pretty tight. And after that, in the 70s, we worked quite a bit together. Phil's group opening for Buddy, did it numerous times. And I would see him, and he knew me, and we would socialize.
So he
And
was nice to you.
it was very nice, and very nice to all the drummers. We all loved him.
Yeah, I always thought he got a bad rap in a lot of ways because I remember when he liked the band. One night I was down at this club, St. James Infirmary, where Hot O'Brien used to own it, and
Yeah.
for a while with Chet. And there was an actual musician's little room there, a little dressing room for us. So a couple of guys from Buddy's band came in, and I won't say who they were, but it was, they said, any place we can smoke a joint around here, I say, sure, I'll take you to my dressing room. So I go to the dressing room, and we smoke a joint in the back room. And then another guy from Buddy's band comes in. And I mean, when he got out the pot, it was like not a couple of joints. He had an ounce of pot, like there in the bags when you used to buy ounces cheap, relatively. Then another guy from Buddy's band, they finished their gig early over at Buddy's place, and they wanted to come down and hear us. So I don't know, they all just went down the trumpet sections, all there to hear Chet. Saxophones are there to hear, and about 5 or 6 cats, and they all got big ounces of pot. I said, what happened? I said, that's interesting. You guys all got some. He said, well, Buddy really likes this band. So he came tonight with a present. He gave everybody in the band.
Everybody a lid.
He gave everybody a lid, yeah.
He loved to smoke, man. And he really did like his band, some of his bands. But he didn't take any shit. But he also was mercurial. If he didn't get high, he would, sort of like Phil in a way, except not quite as nasty.
Yeah. Well, those substances can grab you.
Sure, man. We're all subject to the chemistry.
Yeah, you don't think that you need them, and then you find yourself jonesing. You go, "What's this?"
Yeah, you got any while we're talking about this?
Right. Yeah.
You got the good stuff. So when Bob Duro was dying from cancer, he called me up, and he's literally a week away from dying. And they just been maintaining him, but he wasn't in pain or anything. He said, I got about a week left or something. You got to come and visit. So I did. And I said, you doing okay? I said, yeah, man. I think they're going to give me the good stuff now. And it was gone in about 5 days after that.
I played with him about
Yeah.
a couple of weeks before he died. I didn't actually with Sheila Jordan and Rosetta Vitro.
Oh yeah, did you play on that?
I did that
A
gig,
gig? Yeah. Well, you can't. I was playing. You came and sat in.
What's that?
You came and sat in, I think, while I was playing with them.
That's right.
I'm on the record. Yeah, I'm on the record.
Yeah, well, she didn't. I don't think they put me on the record, but
no, it's Gary Bartz and John and Mark Gross are on the record. But I remember you. Did you play a gig with them?
Was it another that gig at the Gitano?
Yeah.
And were you on that?
I think I was on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we played Anthropology with Sheila and Rosanna.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to play with Bob that night. I played with him. The last time I played with him was Kim Parker's housewarming party.
Oh yeah.
Years before.
Kim's still around.
Yeah, I talked to her
from time to time.
We still speak from time to time too.
Yeah.
But that night I just remembered, I was amazed that Bob stood up the whole time that he sang. He never sat down, and he was very close to the end.
Yeah.
He still had that energy.
The legs of a horse, man. I mean, it was like really well built, lower body, guy, very strong guy, like Arkansas farm boy.
That's what it was.
Well, that's what he was too. But yeah, it was one of the great musicians, the greatest that I ever knew, and one of the great spirits. It was to me, like an older brother, but different than that. It was like those friends of my dad's, that I just really hit it off with these older guys. Leroy Vinegar was like that. We just grooved together, I think they accepted me because I was, trying to be in their category, and I worked on it. I was a pretty cool guy, if I do say so myself. And I could play, and, became friends, and they became colleagues, and the way it's supposed to work,
Yeah, that's how it goes. That's how it is.
Yeah. I can do like 20 minutes on any of these people that we've talked about, and a lot we haven't talked about, but like, Albert Daly, for example, and Leroy Vinegar, and then, Les McCann, who lived next door to Leroy, and I lived across the street. The Axis of Evil.
Yeah,
I moved in, and they went like, "Oh shit, there goes the neighborhood,"
I mean, I've also had some interesting neighbors in my life. One time, I was actually kind of shocked. I turned on the TV, and there was this comic on the Tonight Show, and it was my neighbor who used to live across the street. I spent a little time in Boston. I got out of New York for 3 semesters and taught at Berkeley and lived in Cambridge, not far from Harvard Square. And my neighbor across the street was Steve Wright, the comic.
No, really? He's great, man.
And,
wow.
He was cracking me up then. They used to have a Chinese restaurant that they all did comedy on Sunday nights.
Yep.
So my sister, who was in town at that time too, my sister Joy, and I would go down and watch the comics, Steve Wright and a guy named Steve Sweeney and these Boston comics. And they would have parties. They would have barbecues across the street.
Yeah.
And I remember, them all trying to top each other with jokes one after the other.
Sure.
And then sometimes we'd go and I would sit in somewhere, and they'd go hear me play. So
sure.
Had a nice friendship, but.
Yep. I loved comics and grew up, enjoying them, and played with a lot of them, or played, for them or before them or after them. And some more than others, like Red Fox, I worked with several times.
Oh man,
got to know me, and I got to know him. He always wanted to get high, but never had anything.
that sounds...
we would indulge him in the parking lot, and he would tell us jokes. That was cool.
One joke live by Red Fox is certainly worth a few joints.
Oh, absolutely. So I guess I got a bit of a rep because everybody's always asking me if I got it or not.
Now you're on a Tom Waits record.
Yeah, I did a record with Tom, I met him in Boston. We hooked up through mutual acquaintances, and I ended up recording with him in Los Angeles.
What was he like? What was
He was great, man. Great artist. What he's like for real, hard to
yeah.
say, but we used to hang around together and seemed like a version of his persona, but not nearly as garrulous or, you know, acting as inebriated or everything, but very smart, very funny. He liked any kind of slang stuff. He would steal, like, I gave him a couple of things that he stole, like being in Chicago the first time and you meet the Hawk. The
What was
Hawk Hawk comes around the corner and says, "Where's your overcoat, boy?" And I gave that to Tom, and he used it on the record, I think. But he had a whole poem about that. And the Hawk is out tonight with his whole family. So he was a really marvelous man, a poet and a storyteller, songwriter, and really loved the thing. I organized one of his little bands for a short tour, and me and Steve Gilmore and Al Cohn. And Tom was worried about playing with Al because he thought he wasn't good enough, because he loved Zoot and Al.
right?
He liked the record they made with Jack Kerouac,
Blues and haikus.
Jazz Haiku.
Blues and
And
haikus.
yeah. So when I told him I got Al, he was like, "Oh my God, I can't work with Al. He's too good." I said, "No, man, you guys have got along great." And they did, of course.
He had Frank Vicari a lot too. I used to call him
Frank, well, that's after us. Yeah, they had Frank and
Vicarious.
Chip White, and the bass player Fitz something. I haven't heard about him, but Chip died and Frank died. I saw Frank after that. He was a wonderful player, man.
He was
Worked with him for a long time.
the original kind of
Then he
cat.
switched his whole thing out of the more jazzy beatnik thing into something different. I'm not sure what he's doing now. Mostly theater music, I think.
Oh yeah, almost Germanic, almost like Kurt Weill.
Well, yeah, he does he's done some of the big long shows with Robert Wilson, the director. They do them mostly in Europe, and they're, like he's the guy who wrote and directed Einstein on the Beach with music by Philip Glass, and it's an 8-hour opera. Can you imagine sitting through 8 hours of Philip Glass?
That's
Anyway, and he's written a couple of things with Tom, and I saw him
Well,
one of the last time.
the first hour.
Well, when I would be on the road, like if we were in the same town after we played together, he would come and see me all the time. So I introduced him to Phil, and I introduced him to Jerry Mulligan and his people, and he loved to hang out, and we always had a lot of fun together. But, he became a big deal.
Was Ricky Lee Jones around?
Not when I was around. I know he was crazy about her, though.
So then, I know we got to be winding this down at some point because we'll go on forever. But
That's true.
this is fascinating. All these people, man, and all these stories. We should have you back, and you can just tell us about these people individually. It'd be great. So
Well, that yeah, we could pick some names, and then I could talk about them individually. But there's a lot of people. I will tell you some of my favorite people I ever worked with were Tommy Flanagan, for one, Bill Evans, Zoot and Al, and of course Gary was great, and Bobby Hutcherson. I worked with George Shearing for a year. He was one of the greatest musicians ever, and I really had great experiences in music. Just from wanting to do it and wanting to work and wanting to be good at it, man. I mean, you can't just bang away, man, to be like a musician also.
how long did you play with Bill Evans?
2 weeks. He offered me the gig, but I turned it down. We were already starting to get busy with Phil, and he knew that, and he just said, if you want the job, you got it. I said, no, I can't take, I can't take it, man. And he knew Phil, and he liked the group, and so that was cool. But I was to say, Horace Silver called me around the similar time, and I couldn't do that gig either. Turned that down. But I'm the only guy that I know that turned down Bill Evans, Horace Silver, and the Tijuana Brass in the same year. because my friend Nick Ceroli was the drummer
Part of
with the
that.
Brass. Nick wanted to get me on the gig, so he recommended me to Herb Alpert. They had me come to Philadelphia to audition. And Herb told me he would hire me, but I wanted me to move back to LA. Said, dude, that's not happening. But anyway, yeah. So I turned down, it's not the only groups I turned down too. And I'm not the only people that ever let me go either.
Yeah, right.
You know,
It's,
keep
and,
swinging, man, you know.
and Burton, Gary Burton, how did you
Gary,
get
oh, that's a funny story because Gary, I knew Gary when he first started coming to LA. He started coming with Stan Getz. There's a Gene Chirico and Joe Hunt
yeah.
and Astrid Gilberto. And they played at Shelley's Manhole, and I went and saw the group, and I met all those guys. Joe and I went over to Red Mitchell's one day, and we both played. We got to know each other a little better.
Oh, it's wonderful. I played a lot with Joe.
Well, a great player, man.
Boston,
I
yeah.
recommended him to Gary for the gig in Boston a long, long time ago. He tried to get me to come up there. I said, I'm not going. Who should I get? I said, why don't you try Joe? I don't think he's doing that much. He's there for 50 years. But I've done things like that. I'd like to do that, man. It's nice to promote people that you like or just suggest them, you know. People don't always know. Gary, in fact, did not know my playing. He knew me. He knew that I played, and he knew that I played with a lot of good people. He didn't really know my playing. So, and Roy Haynes was leaving the band. I got this phone call from Gary. He said, Swallow and I have been talking about drummers in New York. We've talked about everybody we know. We can't think of who we really want to play with. And Steve mentioned that you said you always wanted to play with the group, which was no secret. And Moses and I were friends. You know, I knew Roy. I would go see them play all the time. I, knew a lot of the music.
Moses.
Listening, yeah, Moses. Wow. Something else, man. So great. In any case, I was a fan of the group. So I said, I don't, I've known you for years. I don't know what you sound like. Would you come to New York and audition? I said, okay. So he sends me a ticket. And I fly to New York. We go out to his house in Long Island. And Swallow comes out. He's just switching to the electric bass. So he's just got the electric. And Gary says, Steve, let's do Falling Grace. I said, okay. And we play the tune. At the end of it, Gary said, so Bill, that was good, man. Did you know that tune? I said, Gary, I never heard that tune in my life, which was true. And he said, you're hired. And so I got the gig with Gary Burton. I stayed for 3 years.
Wow. And who was on the band? I mean, there was.
It was Jerry Hahn, Steve Swallow, and me. Then Jerry left in the, I joined the band in January of '69. And Jerry left in the summer. And we had a European tour coming up. And Gary decided to hire this young, inexperienced guitar player from LA named Dave Pritchard. And Dave went on for a 3-month tour in Europe. And Gary figuring he would bring him along and, he would get better and better. He didn't get better. And we were stuck with this guy for like 3 months. And we ran into Keith Jarrett on the road, and Keith's struggling with his trio. And he said, why don't you let the trio go home, man, and we'll get rid of Dave and join the group. Let's finish the tour. Let's have some fun, But he wouldn't, he was loyal to his guys, which I appreciate. And we got back from the thing. Dave got fired on landing. And
he was a guitarist, this guy.
Yeah, Dave Pritchard. I don't think he's still alive anymore. I think something happened. He's a nice kid, man, but he thought when he got the gig that he had arrived. But, he had arrived, but he, really didn't have his shit together. He wasn't ready for the gig. Anyway, Swallow recommended Sam Brown. Now, I only knew Sam as a record day guy. So he comes in and starts playing. It's like, damn, man. He's like a bebop, funky guitar player from Detroit, which he was. And so he was in the band the rest of the time.
I was
till the end.
Sam was very depressed. I met actually toward the end of his life. He killed himself.
He did.
Yeah, he killed himself in a very bad way.
I know. I
I'm
know the
such
whole
a-
story, man. We were hanging out right before that, was trying to, make some sense. He was completely nuts at that point.
Yeah, well, he was talking about how you got to be
He
a
has
man.
the really lowest self-esteem.
You got to be a man, and he was a paratrooper in Vietnam,
He
and
was.
yeah, he said that, and I think that's what really messed him up, having to go through. He's a very sensitive
Yeah.
guy.
I think it was Korea, though. I don't think it was Vietnam.
Maybe it was Korea. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, he was super sensitive, wonderful musician. I knew him as a steel string acoustic player in the studios. One of the greatest, man, and a folk accompanist. And I'd heard him play with Miriam Makeba with Harry Belafonte's show. It was one of the greatest shows I ever saw. It was Harry's show with the male choir and Miriam Makeba, and oh, just so great, man. And Sam was her guitar player. But all this African guitar stuff, little backwards stuff, it was marvelous. Then he played the electric guitar, man. He was wailing. Well, we made some records together. Speak for themselves. He made Paul Motion's first album, I think, too. Wonderful player. He's on Keith's record, Expectations. Keith loved him.
yeah. Well, I was sorry that he was in the shape when we played this
Oh,
gig.
his life was messed up. Between
Yeah,
the drugs and the mistress and the wife and kid, and it's just a very tense situation. And he kind of
yeah.
just
Well, Mel Lewis got very mad at me. Mel was on drums, and I still regret this. I don't even want to say it, but we were up all night with Sam after the gig. We were staying over in Jersey, by the Jersey Shore. The gig was way far. It wasn't commutable to Manhattan.
yeah,
So we stayed at this girl, Barbara Loeb's house. I think was her name, or Loeb was her last name. Lisa Loeb.
Lisa Loeb.
Yeah, singer out there.
Yeah.
And the club was in that town, wherever she was from. It was near Atlantic City.
Hmm.
And I was young, man. I was like 24, maybe 25. And I got impatient with him. He was really depressed. Mel, to his credit, stayed up the whole night with him. He didn't catch
Yeah, he was very troubled.
Yeah, and Mel listened to the whole thing. I got upset in the middle of it and just said something perfunctory like, "Well, I hope you work your shit out," because I
Yeah.
was frustrated with it, and I hadn't grown to the point that I have now. For instance, I
Well, it
was,
was pretty hard to deal with, man. We weren't happy, and Sam was at that point a family friend, and we couldn't really deal with. He was just completely bonkers.
well,
So listen, Bob, we should probably wrap it up, man.
Mel never talked to me again.
Really?
And I didn't have the patience with Sam.
Hmm.
At that point, Mel wrote me right off.
Ah,
Yeah, and I never really righted that.
yeah.
But
Well, I wouldn't take it personally. What
well,
are you supposed to do, man?
in the universe for
You live and learn, Bob, right?
I guess you do.
Excuse me.
I hope so. Well, we've been here a while. Jesse's going to have
Been
a heck
over
of a
2 hours now.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's just been a great
Thanks, man.
deal of fun to listen to you tell us of your life and, very insightful things I always wanted to know about you and things I had no idea about. And it's
There's
been
a lot. There's a lot. I don't, I mean, it's a very interesting story, I guess,
it's a great story. And the great drummer, great
Thank you,
man,
man.
Mr. Bill Goodwin, and a great friend for almost
Many, many years now.
Yep. So we thank you.
My pleasure.
And I thank Jessy for her contribution to this, getting us
Thank you, Jessy.
the editing that she's doing. And want to thank you all for watching us, and ask you to give us a like, as they say, and become a subscriber, I believe is what I should say. And to become a subscriber is free. And you can find out about membership as well.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
You are an automatic member.
Oh, that's nice. Thanks, man. But I will check it out. I want to see some of your other interviews.
Oh yeah, that's right. You can catch our interviews on @BobMover
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
on the real side.
The real side. All right.
You can see all of there's so many interviews. I think we've done about maybe 30 or so. In fact, Hal's on one and 40.
Yeah.
And it's time for my treatment.
I hear you, buddy. You sound pretty good, man. Hang in there.
You sound good too.
Well,
Not been tremendously well either,
thank
but
you. Well, it is what it is.
you
Straight
know,
ahead and strive for tone, you know?
that's it, straight ahead.
Strive for tone.
And that's where we'll leave you.
Okay, Bob. You take care, Jessy. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, everybody. And see you the next time on the Real Side. And God bless you all. Thanks.
Likewise. Thank you.